All right, no filter MMA family. This is your boy BJ, and I am back yet again with another live stream. So, guys, Contenders 27. It's a very, very, very nice promotion going that goes on over in the UK, guys. I mean, you talking top-notch professional, and the fighters brag about how well they're treated with Contenders. You know what I'm saying? And very professionally done. Uh, great commentators. Great camera work, great everything. Contenders is a great promotion, guys. You know what I'm saying? It's like the PFL of the UK. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's huge over there. It's huge. A lot of fighters get noticed from Contenders, and guys, Contenders is coming to America, so be on the lookout for that too. But in the meantime, we have Scott Butters. Both of these guys, as you guys know, both have been on this podcast. So we have Scott Butters versus Richard MEARNS. This is a very, very, very intriguing fight, guys. I've said many times that I won't choose a winner in this fight, but I will talk about paths to victory because this fight is very, very interesting, guys. Like, it's a very interesting fight, and I'm gonna talk about why I think this fight is very interesting. So when we look at Scott Butters he was fighting at lightweight, which I think he was a little undersized to be fighting at lightweight. So he's coming down to featherweight to face Richard Mearns. So this is an opportunity for Scott because he's not fighting someone where he has a fight disadvantage. I mean, the size disadvantage. So especially in his last fight when he fought Thinhagen, that guy was huge in there compared to Scott Butters. That guy was huge, and I noticed it as soon as I noticed when Faith first announced it. I went and looked up who he was. I was like, man, he's a pretty big guy. That's a big dude. So, but when he stepped in there with Scott, it was very, very, very obvious. But let's talk about Scott's path to victory. Scott is a grappler, ground-based fighter. That's where he comes. That's his background that he comes from. But he is someone who has worked very hard on rounding out his game. You know what I'm saying? He suffered some injuries in his two fights ago, and then he fought a very oversized opponent and kind of re-injured himself a little bit. So he's coming back off of two losses, but Scott is as healthy as he's ever been, and he's making the cut to 145. So he feels at 145 that he's going to be. He feels that at featherweight he's going to be a lot faster, a lot healthier. He feels his cardio is going to be better. He feels he's just going to be a better version of himself at featherweight. So he's bringing a lot of new tools to his game, and what a no better opponent to test it against than Richard Mearns. Richard Mearns is a damn good opponent to give Scott the opportunity to show his skills. And what I mean by that, that's not a dig on Richard. What I mean is Richard is a stand-up fighter. It's a good matchup. So if Scott wants to test his stand-up, what better opponent to test his stand-up against than Richard Mearns? So anyways, guys, let's get to Scott Butters. Um, First of all, if you go and look at the let me see which fight that was, guys. I just got done watching a lot of footage on both guys. A lot of footage on both guys. It was the Jonathan Templiar fight with Scott Butters. Scott showed a lot of he at this point he said he felt his Scott said he's made a transformation in his striking as far as it feels a lot more natural to him now. But in this fight, I think that was the beginnings of that because Scott was putting a lot of pressure on Jonathan Tempier, and he landed that right hand. Scott has a very powerful his hooks and his punches come with a lot of power. You know what I'm saying? And he's a very long fighter, and he put a lot of pressure on Templiar in this fight, and Templiar kind of shot desperately for a takedown, and Scott wrapped him up with a guillotine and choked him out. So, you know, Scott's pressure, it's going to be interesting because Richard and his brother Tom they're both pressure fighters. They're both pressure fighters. So It's intriguing to see who's gonna, because they're gonna meet, because Scott's puts a lot of pressure on his opponents and so does Richard. So they're gonna meet, and then the striking exchanges are gonna start. So I'm excited to see how that is. But if Scott can fight, if Scott can use his range, he's been working a lot on his kickboxing. If Scott can use his range and use his length and his power, he could, in his pressure, he could keep Richard off of him, because Richard is a shorter, stockier fighter. You know what I'm saying? But Richard throws a really good jab. But if, as far as a jab war, if Scott works a good jab into his striking game, Scott could keep Richard at distance. He could keep Richard at distance with a jab. Um, and we've seen Scott develop his striking over his last few fights, and it's looked a lot. It's looked very good. He in the fight that he lost, he actually backed his opponent up to the fence with striking, and then the takedown happened where he injured himself. So Scott was at his striking is improved every single fight that we've seen, and if he can utilize that pressure along with his reach, he could have a lot of success on the feet against Richard. He can definitely have a lot of success in this fight if he's rounded his game out, and he's been working very hard on his game, because I've seen training footage and footage of Scott working on his stand up, and his stand up looks very good. His stand up looks very, very good, and I'm hoping to see a lot of stand up out of Scott in this fight. So it could if you I'll get to what I was getting ready to say. I'll get to that. But yeah, Scott has a lot of pressure going to his range and size. I kind of talked about that. Scott is in compare. Richard is a shorter, like I said, a shorter, stockier fighter, but Richard is very thick in his midsection. Like in his midsection, in his chest, Richard is very thick, and his legs are very thick. So he's a very stocky fighter, very muscular fighter. And when you look at the body type of Scott, Scott is a longer, rangier fighter. Um, he's a little thinner in the midsection than Richard, but he's longer. You know what I'm saying? And he can really utilize that, and he's good at wrapping those long limbs up around you, especially in the grappling exchanges. When he locked that guillotine in on Jonathan Templiar, there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing Templiar could do. There was nothing Templiar could do to get out of that, because Scott wrapped him up so quick, and his limbs wrap around you and they squeeze. You're not getting out of it. You're not getting out of it. It's crazy how quickly he submitted Jonathan Templiar. You know what I'm saying? So you Scott can utilize his strength and utilize his size in a lot of different ways in this fight. Once again, like I said, Richard is the shorter fighter, so that could work, especially if this goes into a clinch, the clinch game. You know what I'm saying? It can work. If Scott goes for the takedown and gets the takedown, it could work in many different ways for Scott. You know what I'm saying? So he does have that advantage. He does have the range as far as his striking, keeping Richard on the outside, throwing a good leg kick, throwing a good jab. He could keep Richard at bay and land some big shots. Land a lot of big shots on Richard if Scott can settle in and get comfortable with his striking. So he can that's another advantage in this fight for Scott Butters. If you go and watch a couple of other of Scott's fights, Scott Butters throws a really good uppercut. So and like I said before, he throws with a lot of power. Like Scott Butters throws with a lot of power, and he extends his limbs out very much. And he extended out this is his first Contenders fight. He extended out the uppercut, and he landed it, and he rocked his opponent. So Richard's gonna have to be careful. You know what I'm saying about his. He's gonna have to be careful about coming in on Scott, because Scott does throw powerful strikes. He does throw powerful strikes, and then he comes in, and the next thing you know, he's closed the distance, and he's on you. You know what I'm saying? Then he's trying to implement his clinch game and his ground game, get you to the ground, bring you into his world. So Richard's gonna have to really be on the lookout from the long strikes coming from Scott Butters, because they are coming, and especially that uppercut, man. Scott can be at jab range and throw an uppercut, and it landed perfectly. I've seen him do it. I've seen him do it. So Richard's gonna have to watch out for that. Now, as far as I give the grappling advantage to Scott Butters because that is the background that he's come from, and he has a few. He actually has a lot of wins in his amateur career and in his pro career from submission. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, he submitted Jonathan Templier with a guillotine that was locked in before he even reached the ground, and Jonathan Templier went for the double leg takedown. He shot a double leg, and before Scott landed on his ass, the guillotine was already locked up. So, and I know Richard likes to grapple. Richard is very comfortable on the ground. He does the grappling tournaments. You know, but if I have to give the advantage to someone on the ground, I would have to give it to Scott Butters. Now, Richard Mearns is a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu. So, you know, as far as on the ground, they might be on the same level of experience, but as far as um, the slicker grappler, as far as locking up submissions, I would have to give that advantage to Scott Butters. Now, Richard may be able to do more submissions than Scott Butters, but as far as the speed and quickness and you know, of locking up a submission, I'm gonna have to give that to Scott Butters because he locks up submissions very fast on you. He goes for it immediately. He's a good scrambler. Scott Butters scrambles very, 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 very well, and he gets to that, and he locks it in as quick as he can, which is very impressive. Very impressive. All right, I talked about this next one already, guys. The powerful overhand right in the fight with Jonathan Temple, y'all. That fight was a very good fight for Scott Butters. Scott came out and landed a big, big right hand on Templiar, and it kind of woke him up. It kind of woke him up like, whoa, this guy is supposed to be a grappler, and this guy just cracked me. Scott Butters has a very good overhand right, and he likes to use that overhand right. If you watch Scott Butters fights, his fights are on YouTube, guys. Go check them out. Scott's overhand right he utilizes it a lot, and he strikes it. He uses it and gets right into where he needs to be as far as the clinch. Very, very, very. Scott's a very intelligent grappler. He's a very intelligent fighter. He knows how to use. He knows how to use his strikes to get into the clinch and get you down to the ground. Because Scott, he embraces those scrambles. He embraces that grinding type of fight as far as the grappling. He embraces that, and that is a major advantage for him in this fight. Major advantage for him in this fight. Scott's becoming a much more well-rounded fighter, and he's working on every aspect of his game. Now, the next point I wanted to make, I think I've already covered the last one, which is the clinch. The next point I wanted to make was the unorthodox striking of Scott Butters. Scott is not a technical striker. Now, like I said, he's working a lot on his striking to improve his striking, but, grapplers don't really become that. Some grapplers do, but they don't become that technical. But I don't think that's a bad thing to say when I say most strikers don't become very technical, because it's not a bad thing. Strikers have their own. Grapplers have their own way of striking, and I love to see it. Like some of my favorite fighters in MMA period are that type of fighter, a grappler who is an unorthodox striker, but it's very effective, like Habib Nurmagomedov. You know what I'm saying? Miesha Tate. I'm always going to reference those two guys. I'm always going to reference those two. But very unorthodox striking can be very effective. Now, Richard Mearns, on the flip side, is a very technical striker. Very technical and very powerful striker. You know what I'm saying? But Scott can throw something. Scott can throw that overhand right. Scott can throw that uppercut, and it's gonna come. You know what I'm saying? So he uses his unorthodox striking very, very well. Very well. He uses it very well, and he knows how to throw a punch. You know what I'm saying? So, and Scott can throw Richard off with the way that his movement, his feints, his striking is very awkward. And I don't say that in a bad way. Scott, I love you, bro. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but Scott's striking is very awkward. You know what I'm saying? And it's effective. That's the thing. Like his striking is awkward, but it's very effective because he lands with a lot of power, and he clips you, and you know that you've been hit. That's the thing I like about Scott Butters is about his striking. It's very unorthodox, and it's very effective. So, guys, that's my path to victory for Scott Butters. If you guys can't tell, I'm super fucking excited for this fight. Super excited for this fight. So we flip over to my boy Richard MEARNS. Shout out to Richard MEARNS. Okay, I want to talk about a few things that Richard MEARNS brings to this fight that could cause a lot of problems for Scott Butters. That can really cause a lot of problems for Scott Butters. Okay. Richard has a powerful jab and a powerful hook. Now when he fought Dorval in his last fight, it took only the first couple of hits of the fight. Richard already had his eye closed. He had Dorval's eye closed. So Richard throws with a lot of power. He's a very, like I said, his body style, his body type is made to be a powerful striker. You know what I'm saying? He throws. His jab is just, there's a lot of power coming from that jab. If you look at the build of Richard MEARNS and you look up in his back area, like his back and shoulder muscles are very, very big. His muscles are very big. He's very, for his body type, he's a very stocky, big fighter for that weight class. And when he throws his jab, he throws it from the hip, man, and he throws it with a lot of power, and he follows it up with a hook. You know what I'm saying? And his hooks are very powerful hooks. So that's one thing that Scott's gonna have to kind of be worried about. Like if this fight goes into the clinch, and the exit in the clinch, and Richard throws a hook, if he lands that hook, you know what I'm saying, it can stumble you. I've seen it stumble many guys that he's been in the fight with. You know what I'm saying? When he fought Dorval, you seen it right out the gate. Boom, he threw a hook and it landed, and you heard it ring throughout the whole arena they were in. You know, it was very powerful striking, and it only took a couple of hits a couple of hooks and a couple of jabs from Richard MEARNS, a couple of good lands from him, and he already had his opponent swollen. You know what I'm saying? So that's really a test. That really speaks to the power that coming out of Richard MEARNS, coming out of his punches. The next thing I want to talk about is his head kicks. Him and his brother Tom come from a Taekwondo background. Taekwondo background is where they come from. So his kicks, he has a really good head kick. He has a knockout. He has a head kick knockout on his record. So that's one thing that when Scott's throwing those unorthodox strikes, Scott's gonna have to be careful not to let Richard catch him with that head kick as he's trying to reset. You know what I'm saying? Because when Scott throws those unorthodox strikes, he throws with a lot of power, so he could be, if he overswings and throws himself off balance, Richard can catch him with a head kick. So he has to be careful when he's coming in on Richard. Richard throws a really good head kick, and he's very precise with it, and he's very effective, and he's very efficient with it. As far as his efficiency, he'll land it when he throws it. So that's definitely an advantage that Richard can have in this fight. Footwork is the next one. Richard has really good. Now, if you watch his fight with Dorval was doing a lot of side to side lateral movement, and he was bouncing around the octagon. And if you watch Richard's foot placement, Richard always stayed on the outside of Dorval, and he cut the octagon off very well. But he stayed on the outside so he can throw that powerful right hand, that overhand right. Now, that's one thing I like about Richard, too. Richard utilizes the overhand right very well, and he throws it with a lot of power. He throws his overhand right with a lot of power. And he kept his lead leg on the outside of Dorval so that he could land that overhand right, and he landed it many, many, many times in that fight. Many times in that fight. And that's another thing I couldn't add in here, guys, is that Richard is very good at cutting off the octagon. Richard is very good at cutting off the octagon. You know what I'm saying? He's gonna throw that big punch. He's gonna throw that big punch, whether it be to the body, whether it be a kick, whether it be an overhand right, a hook, he's going to throw it. He's going to throw it. And Richard throws a lot of good leg kicks too, especially now. The thing about Richard Mearns has always dealt with fighting larger fighters too, but unfortunately in this fight, he's still going to be fighting someone bigger than him. But that's what he's used to, so um, he's gonna be right at home with that. He's gonna be right at home with that because that's what he's used to. Him and his brother are used to fighting bigger guys. Scott, for once, is gonna have the size advantage in this fight. Now, in the Templiar fight, Templiar was bigger than Scott, but not that much bigger. You know what I'm saying? But he was still bigger. This fight, Scott is fighting somebody that's smaller than him as far as height, but as far as girth, I feel like Richard is thicker of a fighter. Is thicker than Scott, but Scott is the longer, rangier fighter. So um, Scott's gonna have to watch out. Scott leans heavy on his lead leg. Scott's gonna have to watch out because Richard's gonna throw that. He's gonna throw that leg kick, and he's gonna eat up that leg. He's definitely gonna eat up that leg. So that's an advantage that Richard Mearns has in this fight. Also, Richard Mearns has really good ground and pound, guys. Really good ground and pound. He has really good elbows from the top, guys. And if he somehow happens to out scramble Scott Butters and get Scott on his back and starts raining down elbows, it could be a short night for Scott Butters. You know, it could be a short night for Scott Butters, guys. But the question is he going to be able to get the better of the grappling exchanges against Scott Butters? And Richard Mearns is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a Jiu-Jitsu purple belt, so he may have the grappling advantage. He may have the grappling advantage over Scott Butters. So we'll see. You know, as far as grappling at this point with these two guys, they're just, if it goes to the ground, it's just going to be a matter of who can prove that they're the better grappler. Because they're both very high level grapplers. Very high level grapplers, guys. They are both very high level grapplers. So we'll see. We'll see. But if he can get Scott on his back and get top position, guys, and start raining down elbows on Scott, it could be a short night for Scott Butters. Now, another advantage that I think Richard Mearns has in this fight is he's a very fast starter. Right out the gate. He comes right out the gate throwing powerful punches. So Scott's going to have to be careful and watch that flurry at the very beginning because Richard is going to come at you full force. He's a pressure fighter. I think as far as the war of the pressure, I think Richard Mearns may win that battle. I think Richard Mearns may win the battle of the pressure, and I feel like Scott is the one that may have to make the adjustment. Scott may be the one that may have to make it because Scott's going to come out and Scott's going to want to impose his will. But I think Scott's going to be the one that's going to have to make the adjustment because that's just how heavy of pressure that if I had to put a scale, they both are pressure fighters. But if I had to say one put on more pressure than the other, I'd have to say Richard put more pressure on Scott. Puts more pressure on his opponents than Scott does. So right out the gate, Scott's going to have to be careful because Richard's going to come out firing. It is what it is. Next on the list for Richard Mearns is the speed advantage. Now Scott's looking to test his stand up. He's looking to test his stand up. It is what it is. And his stand up is looking crisp in his fights. But as far as the speed, I feel that Richard Mearns coming from that Taekwondo background. That Taekwondo background and his boxing is he's a very fast striker. His jab is lightning fast. His hooks are lightning fast. His overhand right is lightning fast. So he definitely has a speed advantage when it comes to the striking. The Mearns brothers are strikers. Richard Mearns is a striker. You know what I'm saying? He comes from the striking background. So that's going to be a big advantage for him. And the striking and the speed of his striking is going to be a huge advantage for Richard Mearns in this fight. Guys, this matchup is so intriguing. This matchup is so it's great. It's a match made in heaven, guys. I respect both of these guys, but I'm ready to fucking see the fight. I'm ready to fucking see the fight. So if I had to put my money on one of them, you know what I'm saying? If I had to put my money on one of them, I guess the world will never know. I would never reveal. I would never pick sides on this fight. And this is one fight. Usually when I watch fights, guys, I have a dog in the fight. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm usually rooting for somebody to win. But when I respect two fighters that especially two fighters that I know that I talk to on a regular basis, that have been guests on my podcast, whose career I have followed, these are the guys that are grinding it out. This fight is so important for these guys. I just can't pick. I can't pick because I respect them both and I'm friends with them both. But this is a huge fight for them. You know what I'm saying? This is Richards. Scott's headline Contenders many times. This is Richards' opportunity to beat someone with such a following as far as with the promotion Contenders. Scott and I, you know what I'm saying? Now, they both have fought on Contenders before, but a win over Scott Butters for Richard Mearns proves to Contenders, proves to everybody watching, hey, I'm a good fighter. I'm a great fighter. I'm here to fight. I just took out your boy. I just took out your boy. You know what I'm saying? What's good? But for Scott Butters, a win over Richard Mearns is like, I think it means, because this is a very pivotal spot for Scott Butters. He's coming off of 2 losses, which I don't believe really should have been losses. I mean, he got hurt in the first one. He was severely outsized in the second one. But, this can put Scott back on that path that he was on. You know what I'm saying? Those 2 losses set him back. They set him back. But a win over a Mearns brother, you know what I'm saying, this would put Scott right back into that place where he was in. You know what I'm saying? Right back into that spot he was in. And I'm curious to see how he's gonna look at 145. I'm excited to see how he's gonna look at featherweight. But as far as this fight, I want to see how Scott deals with the striking, with the power, and with the pressure of Richard Mearns. And I want to see how Richard deals with the unorthodox striking, the grappling, and the length and size of Scott Butters. I want to see how this happens, guys. I want to see how this happens. This is going to be a great fight. This is going to be a great fight, guys. If you guys are not watching it, you need to watch it. You need to download the Fight TV app and just get this fight and cancel it. I don't care what you do. Fight TV app, September 28th, guys. Um, I'm gonna get in touch with these guys and get the time so I can translate that time into American. Not American. Why would I say American? To the U.S. time, and let everybody know that's watching how to watch this fight. It's not very expensive, guys. Support Contenders, support the fighters. And let's watch it. These guys are gonna put on. I'm telling you guys, if you don't order and watch this fight, guys, if you're a fan of MMA, this is a fight to watch. If you're an MMA fan, guys, this is a good fight to watch because these guys are gonna put on a very good show. These guys are gonna put on a good show. This is gonna be one of the biggest fights to go on in the UK in this 2019. This is one of the biggest fights of 2019 in the UK. Contenders is doing it right. Contenders is doing this is a dream matchup, and Contenders is doing it right, guys. Shout out to Richard Mearns and shout out to Scott Superman Butters, y'all. Let's support these boys and let's watch this good fucking fight. This will be your boy BJ back from No Filter MMA. Drop your comments in the comment section. Hit that like button. And if you have not already, guys, hit that subscribe button. And I'm out.